Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hello there from Bedford. How are you all? How was your weekend? I will be setting off for the States tomorrow. I've got another 2 weeks planned out there. Lots of interviews booked, so can't wait to get out there and record them. Anyway, welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast, which is brought to you by the Mighty Kraken, the best place to buy and sell Bitcoin. I'm your host, Peter McCormack, and today I've got an interview with Wall Street legend Jim O'Shaughnessy. But before that, I do have a message from my show sponsors. And make sure you don't skip the ads. It's the sponsors that allow me to do all this. So first up, we have Wire. Have you checked out Wire yet? They have been sponsoring for a month now, and they are also working with another one of my sponsors, Dropbit. If you haven't checked them out, why not? They are helping companies across the space offer Bitcoin onboarding. So whether you are a solo developer or you're a large team, if you want to simplify user onboarding, if you want to offer your users a fast and easy way to purchase Bitcoin, then you've got to start talking to Wire. They've been crushing it since 2013, focusing on taking care of all the pain in the ass stuff, such as compliance, payments, and liquidity, so you can focus on building your core offering. If you've got the idea for the next killer app, do not let the regulators kill it. Make sure you talk to Wire. You can reach out to them, or you can create a developer account at sendwire.com, which is sendwyre.com. Also, let's talk about Dropbit. Have you downloaded it yet? I know a lot of you have. Actually, I know thousands of you have, which is amazing, and they are absolutely killing it. I'm going to be in Ohio in the next few days. I'm going to be catching up with the team, finding out what's coming next. But they've done so much already, right? They launched Lightning recently with one of the best implementations I've seen for flipping between your Bitcoin and your Lightning wallet. Very, very cool. They also added support for Batch32 addresses, and they've recently offered onboarding so you can buy Bitcoin directly in the app. They've also got cool features such as texting Bitcoin and tweeting Bitcoin. They really are crushing it. So make sure you download Dropbit. And if you want to access your Lightning wallet, if you're still on the waiting list, reach out to me on Twitter. I'll send you a few sats. I'll get you set up. So it's available for the iPhone and Android. Just head over to dropbit.app, which is dropbit.app. And also, Consensus is coming. Have you been to Consensus before? I've done the last two in New York. It's great. It's great to see all Bitcoiners when they come into town. I'll probably be hosting a party again. So if you're thinking heading to Consensus, they will be bringing together the who's who of the crypto community in New York, and they always manage to bag some great speakers. They've previously had presidential candidate Andrew Yang, SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, and CEO and co-founder of Coinbase Brian Armstrong. The list goes on and on. So you can register now for the lowest price of the year. Tickets will never be lower than the $999 that you can get them for now, but this offer expires on the 13th of December. Using the code WhatBitcoinDid, the first of 50 people to register will get a limited edition swag bag. So find out more by heading over to consensus2020.com, which is CONSENSUS2020.com. Okay, so on to the show, and today I've got an absolute legend of the Wall Street and the meme master, Jim O'Shaughnessy, a man who has over 30 years of experience in equity returns and built a fund with over $6 billion under management. I pinged Jim recently on Twitter. I said, come on, let's get you on the podcast, and he was very welcoming. He agreed to come on. So while I was out in New York, we sat down and recorded this interview. Jim is also the best-selling author of books like Invest Like the Best and What Works on Wall Street. And you know what, coming into this interview, I expected we were mainly going to talk about investment and Bitcoin. And while we did cover that, we ended up going down the rabbit hole of free speech and the power of media and its bias. Very interesting stuff. Also, after the interview, it was quite funny, actually, because Jim himself had never personally owned Bitcoin. So I got him to download the Dropbit app, and I sent him his first $50 of Bitcoin. So he's now one of us. But it was really cool to get some time with Jim. He's a great guy. I really enjoyed this one. I know you will. But if you've got any feedback, do reach out to me. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. And as I said, I'm back off to the States tomorrow, getting my final plans together. There's so many places I need to hit and interviews to do. It's all a bit last minute on some of these. But I think I'm going to be going to New York, Boston, San Fran, LA, Hawaii, Texas, and Washington. So I'll let you know if I am in any of those places, and hopefully we can grab a beer if you want to do that. Anyway, any questions, feel free to hit me up. Outside of that, I hope you have a great week, and I will chat to you soon. Good afternoon, Jim.
Good afternoon. Great to be on your podcast, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. You're a bit of a legend. You were also on my friend's show. I'm aware of one of your books. I actually think I read one of them.
Cool.
I think I did years ago. That was I I was on the red eye last night and I couldn't sleep. I was on the red eye from SF and I was doing through. I was like, invest like the best. I'm sure I've read it.
That was my first book.
Yeah, I'm sure I've read it.
Yeah.
There was a time where I thought I wanted to be a broker and, from home and sit in my pants and trade money and drive a Ferrari. And I think I tried it for about 2 months and I pretty much lost everything.
That's the typical story.
Yeah, I don't have the temperament for it. But we were talking before we started. I've been traveling a lot around the States, getting to know the country. Like I said, this is about my 70th visit. I've been traditionally New York, Vegas, LA, San Fran.
Typical.
Florida. Yeah.
Typical.
Now I'm spreading out.
Yeah.
I've been to Wyoming, which was beautiful.
Which we were talking about earlier. It's such a beautiful state, and I recommended Montana. We just went there. I've been to all 49 states except Alaska, so I got to get there.
When are you going to go?
Probably next year sometime. My wife and I were talking about it. We're going to go to Japan because she's never been. I have. And then she was like, well, we got to knock that 50th state off. So, but Montana, very much like Wyoming, I love the Western ethos. They're different people than we are here in New York. And it's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I spent some time up there recently with Caitlin Long, who is, she's kind of a big supporter of the Bitcoin and blockchain community. And she does a lot of work working with legislators to try and keep them away from kind of very restrictive, closed-minded laws, and they've done a lot up in Wyoming. The guy I met, Tyler Lindholm, he's very much a libertarian Republican.
So you and I were talking about that before. I don't really have a party. I think if I'm defined by one thing, I am fiercely anti-authoritarian, and I just I hate the idea of a self-selected group of people who think they know what's right for you.
Yeah.
And so, I avoid politics a lot because, I don't really have a party and, strange days, but I do watch with great interest, both here and, what's going on in the UK.
Yeah, I watch here with a lot of interest. Actually, I think I've more interest here than the UK right now, which I probably will annoy some people. It's just, I actually think I'm starting to almost spend as much time here as in the UK, and I think I'll probably end up here. But I do see the US tends to lead the world in certain ways, and what I struggle with politics is the relationships between politics and media.
Right.
Look, you don't want to flip the other way. You don't want state-controlled media, that's worse. But there is still, I'm starting to see there's two forms of media censorship. There's the censorship by the state, if you've got state-controlled media, but I actually think politically biased media is a form of censorship as well.
So I could not agree with you more completely. I've been working on a piece that looks at the idea of preference falsification and revealed preferences. And so I think the media globally is still trying to adjust to the resizing that the internet put them through.
Yep.
Because if you think about it, remember, back in the day, they were the fourth estate. They might not make a lot of money, but they had a ton of prestige. And now with, where the best Apple analyst is a blogger and where people call out the media for all of their mistakes. I mean, I think the most famous one was the first one, I think, when Dan Rather did the whole thing on George W. Bush about how he got out of the military and presented the letters and everything. And then like a half an hour later, there was a guy on the internet saying, oh, by the way, that font wasn't created until 1989.
I need to ask you a question first,
Sure.
because highly relevant to something that I saw this week. So you mentioned the fourth estate.
Yes.
Is this a US thing? Because this week I heard Facebook referred to, it might have been Mark Zuckerberg referred to Facebook as the fifth estate. And a lot of people were like, oh, that's very interesting, but I didn't understand what it meant because I've not heard of these.
Yeah, that's exactly what it means. So in the US, the fourth estate is usually the term that you use to describe the media, the established media.
Right.
So, the New York Times, the paper of record, used to be. The Wall Street Journal, the paper of business. And the fourth estate was there, sort of technically to keep the other three in line. Right. Business, government, military. And now what's happened, I think, and I don't think this adjustment is done. The internet has so turned everything on its head. And personally, I think that a lot of good is going to come out of that, but there's going to be some bad as well, right? I mean, you can't have everything be, unicorns and rainbows. And so what the internet is doing is it is finally harnessing distributed intelligence. By that I mean, so if I wanted to look something up in 1989, I had to go to the library. I had to know the Dewey Decimal System. I had to really be motivated. And luckily I was. But there were a lot of folks who weren't, right? And now, not true. You want to know something? Go on Twitter. You want to know something about finance, financial Twitter, which I'm a big part of? You put your question on there, and some of the smartest people in finance are going to answer your question for you. And so the empowerment of the individual, I think, is like a basic good of the internet. Now, of course, there's a basic bad too, right? It's like somebody was saying to me the other day, has the world gotten a lot crazier? And I'm like, no, it's just that left half of the tail, they never had a microphone, right? They would send the letter to the editor, and the editors would pass it around and have a chuckle and then bin it, right? Nobody heard from that person. Now they've got this huge megaphone that they can use. So it's a bit like, yeah, they were always there, but now you're hearing from them. But yeah, I think curation can solve that problem.
Yeah, and I think the free news is a bit of a problem.
Oh, I agree.
Because it's all then driven by media. And I know it was there before, but and your headline on your front page of your newspaper was your traditional clickbait. What is the headline? But that was one headline, and you tend to stick to a paper you like now. But online, there's such low friction to read an article. It's clickbait. I purposely refuse to read anything from BuzzFeed, for example.
Yeah, so I've gone a bit further. About 10 years ago, I decided that I was going to stop watching all television news because it had become very apparent to me that what had happened was politics is the new religion, and they are all selling dogma, right? And I don't care if you're a conservative and watching Fox or if you're a liberal and watching MSNBC. It's talking points, it's dogma, it is not open-minded, it is doctrinaire, and it is, if you don't agree with us, you're a heretic, burn the witch. And I don't think that leads to good outcomes.
Nope. And you're meant to be the United States.
Exactly.
And actually what you are is the divided states right now, and the division suits, I see two groups of people who want power in government and media. It's really, the agenda really suits them. The agenda that suits the people is actually everyone coming together and trying to work together.
So that is such an interesting comment, because I was just having a really long conversation with a friend about that. And we were both talking, because we both travel a lot, right?
Yep.
And we joke that when we leave the New York area, we go to real America. And we were talking about that, and he said to me, do you find that, your average American just is kind of a go along, get along, don't, let's work things out? And I'm like, absolutely.
Yep.
And so I think it's really refreshing, right? So if you're here in New York or, the New York metro area, it's a very different place, as is San Francisco, by the way. So we get myopic, right? And we think, it's the old New Yorker cartoon of a New Yorker's view of the world, and it's New York and then California, and everything else is flyover country. Well, that's absolutely wrong. And when you go to so-called flyover country is where you're going to find those types of Americans that you're talking about. They don't have time for all of these petty divisions and these ridiculous debates that lead nowhere. They really want to, let's just roll our typical American attitude.
Yep.
Let's roll our sleeves up, let's work together, let's get it done, let's move on.
Yep. That's the great thing about traveling outside of these cosmopolitan cities, is that, and going out I've been out to Portland this week. As I said to you, I've been out to Wyoming.
Yep.
I'm gradually spreading out. I've been invited out to Montana. One of the big shifts that happened with all this traveling is my opinion on guns changed. I was very, very anti-gun.
Sure.
Now I'm not so anti-gun. I wouldn't say I'm pro everyone having an AR-15, but I understand the arguments. And when I went out to Wyoming and spent time with the people there, and and trying to understand what guns meant to them and the part of their life, I was like, well, this isn't a danger. The danger is to people with mental health problems in cosmopolitan cities.
Exactly. And it's really such a contentious debate, and
An unwinnable debate.
Yeah, but I, like you, I live in a very cosmopolitan place, and guns not a good idea, especially when mental health is in question. But the thing that I would say is the thing that I have the greatest admiration for in the United States is the Bill of Rights. You can't criminalize speech here because we have the First Amendment.
Yeah.
And believe me, if we didn't have the First Amendment, we would have criminalized certain speech here way long ago.
You might not know this, Jim. I'm being sued in the UK right now for words, for saying something, for calling somebody a fraud.
That's insane.
Insane, yeah.
It's insane. And so I have a lot of business in Canada, love Canadians. They are like among Canadians, Kiwis, Australians, best people on the planet.
Yep.
But I'm seeing that happening in Canada now, where they are letting people sue people for speech. And I think that is the height of insanity. I mean, look, there's a lot of things that people might say that we disagree with. There's a lot of things that people might say that are crazy, right? But the fact is, the only way you get to sort that out is to have free and open speech.
Yep.
And there's a Peter Thiel's guy who runs his investment
Eric
job.
Weinstein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Eric has this new podcast called The Portal.
Yep.
And he had a great episode about preference falsification. And that is happening more and more and more, especially in this country, but I'm sure in the UK as well. And I talk to younger people, especially because, I'm 59. I miss that, right? So I don't falsify my preferences. I might say things that people...
I don't know, man. You meme like a champ on Twitter.
Well, I'm a big believer in being who you are.
Yeah.
And so, but when I talk to young people, right? And I'll say, okay, so are you ever in a situation where something comes up, let's use guns again.
Yep.
And let's say you don't like guns, but you believe in the Second Amendment. Do you say, but I believe in the Second Amendment? Almost to a person, men and women that I talk to that are, let's say, under 40, all have been in situations, not just about guns, but a lot of different things, where they say, no, I basically go along. And I say, that's really interesting. Why do you do that? It's not worth it. To be ostracized socially. And, I'm a big fan of reading and Orwell. He wanted to call that book The Last Man in Europe.
Did he really?
Yeah. And the publisher was like, no, we can't do that. That's just too much. So 1984, all he did was invert 48, because that's when it was published. So 1984, but I was revisiting that, and so Newspeak versus Old Speak.
Yeah.
And Newspeak is designed to take your conceptual ability to think, even think about things like freedom away from you. And I think it was Wittgenstein who said, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. And that terrifies me, right?
Yep.
And so what's happening, though, you want to see the results of people falsifying their preferences, look at the guy who's sitting in the White House in the United States right now. Talk about preference falsification, right? And so I think it gets dangerous, right? Because you can't sit there like the school mom. Taleb has that great piece, Intellectual Yet Idiot. And I reposted that recently because of some stuff I was working on. Got a lot of comments, and it's a real problem. And you being sued in the UK because you called somebody a fraud, to me, that is absurd.
Well, of course it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And he likely is a fraud, and I'm doubling down on it, but he likely is a fraud, but I could be now bankrupted just for saying these words. And there's been a few things like that in the UK. There was a comedian... I'm not approving of this. I actually think it was just a bit vulgar, but he taught his dog to do a Hitler salute. He got put in prison for it.
Insane.
Which is insane. I don't agree with what he did, but I don't agree you
not.
should be put in prison for it.
And that's always the thing, right?
Yeah.
They'll take some kind of crazy thing like that, right, that neither you nor I would ever agree with, think that's horrible, but will defend his right to the death to do it, right? Getting put in prison for teaching a dog a dumb trick? We have to think about these. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Well, yeah. Like I said, I don't agree with it, and I think it's better that it's out there and people condemn him if they don't agree. Just say, look, that's a bit tasteless, or why are you doing that?
Exactly.
But if someone wants to find it funny, then so be it. I'm a big supporter of I think the comedy hall should be the first bastion of free speech.
Totally agree. My
Because-
daughter is a stand-up comedian.
Right. Well, you have these people in colleges who are having to sign non-offensive agreements, and it's just like, well, hold on. You can't be offended with comedy. Comedy is about testing you and testing you as an individual. I don't even know what offending means anymore, Jim. I really don't.
I agree.
What
And
what happens when you're offended?
exactly. It's like, okay, grow up.
Yeah, I'm offended. Then what?
You stop being offended.
Yeah.
And you move on with your life.
Yeah.
It's Ricky Gervais. I love.
Yeah, great guy.
And I look at him as a hero, man. I mean, the guy is out there. Same with Dave Chappelle here in the United States. Jonathan Pye in the UK.
I like Bill Burr.
Yeah, Bill Burr is fantastic.
Yeah.
And you know what? They're the vanguard. They are like, no, we're not doing this. We have to have the right to speak freely. And if you get offended, get offended. And, who would have ever thought, right? Lenny Bruce, who was a very famous comedian here in the U.S. in the 50s and 60s, died tragically of a drug overdose at age 40. But
my
he
age.
got arrested. I don't know how many times, because he said swear words on stage. I mean, honestly?
Really?
But so people who don't know that there was this huge group of people, and since we're on comedy, we'll stay there, right? Like Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, Richard Pryor. All of these people broke new ground, and they opened up the conversation. And I'm a huge we were talking about it the other night, and one of the things that I tend to be a really rational optimist, right? And so we were talking about the United States, and my daughter was here with her boyfriend, and I said, you know what's really interesting? When I was born in the United States in 1960, okay, Jim Crow laws were still in effect that precluded black people from voting in the South.
Yeah.
My oldest sister, who unfortunately died, was married to a black guy, an immigrant, and her marriage, when she got married, was illegal in half of the states of the United States.
Did they deal with a lot of abuse for that?
They lived in a pretty liberal area,
Okay.
Denver, so luckily no. But the point is, 1971, you're a woman, you want a credit card, you have to have your husband's approval.
That's crazy, right?
And look at how this country changed. I think gay rights. I mean, look at how quickly we were able to adopt a much more tolerant attitude towards a lot of things. And I think a lot of that comes from, back to comedy, from people kind of pushing the envelope. They call it the Overton window. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've heard of it, right?
Yeah.
And so the Overton window moves around a lot. But if you understand history, it always has, right? So one of the examples I love to give is I love British history, and I love European history in general, and I love Roman history and Greek. But so an example is like in the late 18th century, early 19th century, one of the fashions in Paris was for women to wear sheer tops without bras, right? So that their breasts were completely visible.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, right? 20 years later, gone. High necklines, everything demure. The Overton window shifted. Fashion shifted. So, I always kind of smile when I hear people say, well, we're living in unprecedented times. No, we're not. I mean, yeah, we have a lot of really cool things like the internet, like the raw power of distributed intelligence. Yeah, those are great. But look, human behavior doesn't change that often,
No.
right? It's like, I was talking to a European journalist earlier today, and I was saying, the last sustainable edge in investing is human behavior. Arbitraging human behavior, because it doesn't change. And the more history you read, the more you understand this, right? It's
Yep.
like somebody was bemoaning the fact that, those millennials don't understand the baby boomers, and the baby boomers don't understand the millennials. And I laugh, right? All of my kids are millennials, and I've been made an honorary millennial by many people on Twitter. But the joke is, that's been the way it's been all the way back to ancient Greece,
Yep.
right? If you go to the original readings of writings and stuff, it was like, this new generation, they're crazy. No, they're not.
Nope. They just lived a different life.
Exactly.
That's all it is.
Which is fine.
Yeah, and they will live a different lives from their kids. But I do think there's a few things we I don't want to say we need to be careful, because that's almost like I'm saying other people have a responsibility. But one of the things I'm jealous of, being from the UK, I'm jealous of the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
I'm very, very jealous that you have that, because I don't fully understand the history. One of the things I'd like to do is actually find a very good book on the history of the Bill of Rights, how it is debated, how the founding fathers agreed on what was important.
I actually might have a couple of titles for you. I'm going to have to look them up, though, so they're right.
We'll do that afterwards, because I really want to understand it, because I do feel like your constitution is under attack.
It is.
Constantly at the moment. And it's really, really interesting. And one of the things that also crosses my mind is that, does there come a time where it has to be redebated? So, for example, is the Second Amendment the gun rights?
Right.
We're in a very different time now. The weapons are very different from then.
That's right.
Does it need reconsidering? I don't know. Is there anything built into the U.S. Constitution that allows things to be redebated?
Absolutely.
Right.
And that is amending the Constitution. But the founders made it ridiculously hard to do that.
Good.
And they did that for a reason, right? We lucked out. Again, sometimes it's just luck. We were founded at kind of the height of the age of enlightenment and reason. Mm-hmm. And all the thinking then were the natural rights of mankind, all of those things. And all of those things informed our Constitution, and as well as a realistic viewpoint about what human beings are all about. Right.
Well, but you were being ruled by us
Exactly.
from across an ocean. I mean, once you've got rid of us, it's kind of like, well, we don't want to be in that position again. We don't want an authoritarian ruler. So what are the things we can put in place to ensure that?
Exactly. And so I personally, venerate the U.S. Constitution, but I also venerate even more the Bill of Rights, because they realized when they read the Constitution, hey, wait a minute. There's a lot of room for interpretation here. Mm-hmm. Let's take that away. Let's make sure the First Amendment, to me, the First Amendment is one of the greatest inventions that men have come up with, right? Yep. And that is the ability to speak your mind, no matter what, and not have other people in a position where they can throw you in jail or silence you or do any of that. Because, again, that's how we learn. That's how we move further.
So let me ask you something then with regard to that, because a hotbed of discussion around the First Amendment right now is Twitter, with people losing their accounts or being banned. I've had a 12-hour ban once. I had a guy constantly trolling me. I called him a mangina. And I'm assuming that crossed... Yeah, I know. Because I just thought he was being wet. But I'm assuming that crossed some kind of... I don't know.
Given I know I have a lot of Brit friends, there's a colloquial that in this country is very bad, but in Britain it's not bad at all.
Cunt.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it can be bad, actually. You know what, Jim? Yeah, people are going to hear it. There's two ways, and I think Ricky Gervais covered it very well when he explained it. It's like, if you're like, he's a massive cunt, he's a terrible, terrible human. But if you say, oh, he's a funny cunt, he's like the funniest he can be. But we say it just all the time. We say it like you say jerk.
Exactly.
And nobody says a problem. I have to hold my lips shut here because I've said it. Somebody looked at me like I killed a baby.
Right.
I was like, what?
Yeah, well, the old joke about America and the UK, it's two countries separated by a common language.
Yeah. Well, wasn't there a guy, once you kicked us out, he just made some amendments to the language. So he got rid of the U in colour, for example, and the U in favour. And he changed the S's in things like centralised to disease.
Yeah.
What was that all about? Was that just like some of your own identity?
I think so. Yeah. But back to Twitter.
Oh yeah, so back to Twitter. So I got a 12-hour ban, and quite interestingly, since then, my engagement's dropped as well in certain ways. But I've noticed now that certain people, I don't agree with. It's very tricky, actually. Let me say it's very tricky, because if somebody was harassing me on Twitter and abusing me and saying awful things over and over, and it was just repetitive, I guess I can block or mute them, but it's not very nice. At the same time, there was a thing on Quillette, I think, put out that was saying people are now being banned for saying things which are biological fact.
Right.
So, for example, at the moment, a big topic is trans and trans rights, which is great, do whatever the fuck you want, but there are certain people now who, for example, are crossing sports. So there was a man who, and I'll probably get my terminology wrong or pronouns wrong, if there's a listener offended, I apologise, but he became a woman, started fighting MMA, broke someone's skull. Yeah. There's a rugby player who broke someone's leg, and I was just like, we really need to be very careful about this.
Yeah, it's a really sticky wicket, right? Because on the one hand, you want to be in favor of people being able to do what they want to do. But then on the other hand, the idea of biological men who become women going into women's sports, I mean, that's tough, right? Because I saw a piece the other day that said, if we allow this, we're going to wipe out women's sports.
Yep.
It's going to be men's sports and co-ed sports.
But the bigger point is that we should be able to discuss this.
Yes.
On Twitter.
Yes.
And I don't feel like I should be... So I don't think I can go on Twitter now and say, I think it's a disgrace that this person who's biologically a man, who is now a trans woman, God, I hope I've got this right, should not be able to do this. Right. I fear that I would get reported and banned. Probably. And that's where I think liberalism's gone too far.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do for the most part is I try to take a very stoic attitude towards all things political. And I usually don't get engaged there because, it's like the old joke, don't wrestle with pigs because they like the mud.
Yeah.
I don't like the mud. And I don't think that I'm helping anyone. I'm certainly not changing anyone's mind. And so I read a lot of Marcus Aurelius. I read a lot of Seneca, the Stoics, right? And one of the things that taught me was don't concern yourself with anything that you personally, through your own actions, can't change, right? And so if you think about things that way, there's so many things that just suck the energy out of people. And they're diversions, and they're bad diversions at that. And one of the things that I just don't understand, I actually did a Twitter thread about it, and I reposted it because of some stuff I was reading that concerned me. It's like, listen, this is not some big conspiracy by society. It's the way society has always been. They're trying to knock you into a form that is most useful to society.
Yep.
And it's not like, okay, it's, there's a conspiracy. No, that's society. Just choose not to be so knocked. And the way I look at it is, don't get diverted by all of those meaningless arguments where no one is going to change their mind. People are shouting at each other.
Yeah.
And
I've done it.
Yeah, of course. We all have. But basically what I'll do is so I try to avoid all of those because they're just time sucks. And I'm not going to change anyone's mind, and nor do I expect that I will.
Well, I do it sometimes. I tell you why I do it, and I upset a lot of Bitcoin people as well doing this, but whilst I have a Bitcoin show, I don't actually make it for Bitcoiners. I think that's where some of them are confused. I make it for people who might be interested in Bitcoin or thinking about Bitcoin and want to come in. It's a very easy, gentle show to come into it. Just some Bitcoiners like it. But I use Twitter as a research tool.
Oh, yes, absolutely. As do I. I've got a lot of projects going on.
But I will put out something provocative because I want to see the response, and that helps me decide how to make a show or what to make a show about.
Interesting.
So I don't just talk about Bitcoin. I've done a show about guns. What I'm talking to you about today about, the US Constitution, the censorship. I think these things are very interesting topics, but I really like to challenge them, and I really like to put out something that really might even upset people.
Sure.
Not because I want to have a fight. I just want to see, where their values are. For example, there's this guy this week called Hotep Jesus, who's a provocateur. He says some outrageous things, and he's got a mild interest in Bitcoin. I've totally gone on his side where all the Bitcoiners have gone against him. And the reason I've gone on his side is that there's going to be lots of people like him who might come into Bitcoin of all different attitudes. And some of them are going to be really annoying, and I want to see how Bitcoiners react to them.
Sure.
And they don't like that I've supported him, and I'm going to support him because I want to learn about that. I don't learn anything by just talking to Bitcoiners about Bitcoin.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. I was on Pomp's show, and basically I got to say I don't know how many times. I should count them. Because
that was a great show, by the way.
Oh, thank you. And I'm fascinated by things like Bitcoin because I don't know. Honestly, I see a lot of challenges, right? Not a good thing because there is a historical precedent when the United States made owning gold illegal. And
was that Nixon?
No, that was FDR. That was Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Okay.
That was in the 30s.
I see. So
Nixon closed the gold window.
Yes, and
different thing.
Right. I don't know. So I'm aware of the Nixon one. Tell me about the other one.
So FDR during the Depression decided that to get people to stop hoarding, right, and insisting on gold, he was just going to take away the right to own gold, and he did quite efficiently. you were allowed to own jewelry, gold jewelry, but that was it. And you went to jail if people found you with gold.
Wow.
And so I extend that thinking to Bitcoin, right? So the United States, despite what some people might believe, is still the world's biggest economy and the powerhouse. And if the United States decides for whatever reason that, you know what, Bitcoin, yeah, no, that's illegal.
Yep.
And by the way, if we find you with Bitcoin, you're going to prison for the rest of your life. That would put a real crimp in it. Now, I've talked to people, I have a lot of friends who are really into Bitcoin and know so much more about it than I do. I'm the first to admit my ignorance. And so I ask them these questions because I'm interested. And the most common response is, well, no, what'll happen is it'll just move offshore. And I'm like, okay, makes sense. But if it's not available in the world's biggest economy, don't you think that that's going to kind of put a crimp in its style? And
Yeah, you're right.
I was just recently in Africa, and I quipped to my wife, because we were talking about Bitcoin, and I said, when the game guides prefer a Bitcoin transfer to US dollars, then I'll know they're onto something.
Well, interestingly, so with my podcast, all my sponsors are American-based, but I'm based in the UK.
Sure.
I actually prefer to be paid in Bitcoin.
Exactly.
It's very strange. It just makes my life a lot easier.
Sure.
But there's a whole bunch of game theory or theories about what will happen if the US banned it. Yes, it wouldn't be helpful short term. It could be counterproductive to the US because what's happening is there is this dual Bitcoin economy that's growing.
Right.
So there's suspicion and almost an expectation that Bitcoin is being used to get around sanctions.
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
You can't. It's very hard to stop. Very hard to you can stop. You can control the banking system as the US, but you cannot control Bitcoin. Also, if you ban it, you can keep it in your head because it's numbers. Do you own any Bitcoin?
I own a Bitcoin hedge fund.
Have you ever yourself
Owned Bitcoin
Have you
outright.
ever actually done it?
No.
What?
And
I'm going to give you some after this.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
The reason we did the hedge fund, so O'Shaughnessy Family Partners is the kind of family office
Yeah.
that owns O'Shaughnessy Asset Management. We have a lot of employees who also are owners, but we also make a lot of different investments. And so my son Patrick, who has
Yep.
the Invest Like the Best podcast,
Yep.
did this great series on Bitcoin. And I remember we were at a memorial for my cousin's son who had died tragically very young, and we had half an hour in the hotel lobby before the bus came to get us to take us to the thing. And I said, okay, he had just finished it. And I went, 30 minutes, explain Bitcoin to me. He did a very good job,
Yeah.
which actually led to this investment. So one of the things that I like to do is I'm a big believer that you can intellectually understand things, but unless you put some skin in the game, you're not going to really pay attention.
Yeah,
Right?
agreed.
And so I said to Patrick, well, what do you think? And he's like, well, these guys who I interviewed, they can also short Bitcoin and the various things. And I'm like, that's intriguing to me. And so, that was a couple of years ago. Have I learned anything? To be honest, not really.
Well, if you started a couple of years ago, you would have made money.
So what was
On paper.
Yeah. So what was super funny about it was we made the investment right before Bitcoin soared, right?
Nice.
And so we're looking at the statement, and I'm like, maybe we should have put some more money in this. Well, then it crashed.
Yeah.
And the value of our investment actually went below our original investment, and now it's above it again.
Yeah.
But to me, okay, I've seen stocks do that all my career, right? So I'm not learning. It keeps me interested. It keeps me interested in listening to folks like you and having conversations with people who know far more about it than I do. I think the most powerful thing that we as investors can do is admit I don't know.
Okay.
Because when you are willing to say I don't know, you learn things. Because you're not trying to defend a position. You're not trying to say, well, gosh, Bitcoin is going to work because XYZ, or Bitcoin isn't going to work because of XYZ. Educate me.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to me because I put a thing up on Twitter the other day, that the most successful myth in my estimation is the belief that money has value.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Hey, I've learned that with Bitcoin.
Exactly. Right? But if we collectively as a world didn't believe that, we'd still be in huts. We'd still be, hunting and gathering. Mm-hmm. And the myth of money, right? I call it ground state reality. Yeah. So ground state reality to me is what the most people on the planet Earth, wherever you happen to be sitting on planet Earth, believe. And the internet, by the way, I think is fooling around with ground state reality. And I think it's changing ground state reality. That's a different topic. But anyway, so the first thing that sprung to mind was, wow, money. We have, I don't know, do you like Rick and Morty? Have you ever seen Rick and Morty?
I know it, but it's not really. I've never got into it. But I've actually. There's a guy who memes Bitcoin with Rick and Morty shows, and I've actually recorded an overdub for him.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
So my friend Dan Jeffries wrote a great essay about Rick and Morty and the meaning of life, and he got me turned on to Jed McKenna, the spiritual warfare guy. Really interesting stuff. And so anyway, my eldest daughter. I have 3 kids, so. My son works with me at OSAM. Yep. I have 2 grandchildren with him who I adore. It's great to be 59 and have a 5-year-old grandson and a 3-year-old granddaughter. My daughter, Kate, is an author of children's, or not, she'd kill me for that, of middle grade fiction.
Right, okay.
She has a book coming out next year, and she lives in Berkeley.
Nice.
And then my youngest is a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
And she's moving to Brooklyn from Chicago, and I'm delighted.
Great.
But the Kate, my middle daughter, we were talking about before I'd read Dan's essay, right? She's like, Dad, you've seen Rick and Morty, right? And I'm like, no, what's that? And her husband and she went, oh my God, you are going to love this show. And so literally I watched all of them in one sitting. You got to watch it.
Now I've got to do it.
Because there's one bit, and the reason I bring it up is so Rick is this super genius who has figured out how to go through all of the alternate universes, and he's hysterical. He's an alcoholic because of the real nature of the universe, which and so anyway, he gets caught by the Galactic Authority, right? Yeah. And they're trying to get his secrets out of him, and they can't do it, and he outsmarts them, and he breaks free with the help of his grandkids. And so they go up to the level, the most important level of the intergalactic thing, and he says, I am going to watch my kids watch this work. I'm going to destroy the Galactic Empire. And they're like, what are you going to drop weapons from space? Are you going to, launch a, all-out attack on all their warships? He goes, no. I like the ideas, but something much simpler. I'm going to destroy them by changing a 1 to a 0. And the 1 to the 0 is the exchange rate on the galactic currency.
Right, okay.
So he changes it to 0. Everything collapses.
Brilliant. But you're right. And I think a lot of people just walk through life just not really thinking about money. I mean, I was debating with my friend the other day how outdated the education system is. Oh. We don't even teach children about money, like what it is, what it means, how you use it, like what inflation means, what it means to save. We don't do any of that.
And now you're on one of my things that I always get on a soapbox about, because first off, our education system in the United States is the way it is because of farmers and because of industrialization. And guess what? They wanted to make sure that people could sit quietly in a room for 8 hours because they were going to do that in the factory.
Yeah.
And so we are so behind where we should be, in my opinion, of education, and financial education is woeful. There's a great book called Innumeracy by John Paulos, who's a mathematician, I would recommend. And you brought up inflation adjusting. Honestly, people cannot get their head around it. They literally can't get their head around inflation. And so I tried all these various ways to do it, like, okay, so if, it's 1990 and you've got $10,000 and your $10,000 buys a basket of goods that has 100 units, right? And you give that money to a money manager, and 10 years later, you've got 20,000, he's doubled your money. Wow, he's great, right? Well, not really. You've got to see, what does that 20,000 buy? If it buys a basket of 90 items,
no good.
No good.
Yeah.
And so, but it's really funny because because of that natural sort of inability to get inflation, guess what government does? I hate to admit it, but they're pretty smart. I mean, it happened in this country in the 70s. What did we do? We monetized the debt. We inflated our way out of the huge debts that the U.S. had. And because the U.S. could issue its debt in its own currency. How crazy is that, right?
Wow.
And yet, we'll do it again. It's happening right now, right? With all this QE and blah, blah, blah.
I think they're going to struggle with 20 trillion.
It's insane.
Well, this is why Bitcoiners love Bitcoin, because one of the most important things is there will only ever be 21 million. You can't print any more.
Right.
So by nature, as more people adopt it, it has more value.
I agree. And that sort of stuff fascinates me. And if you reach that tipping point, right, where the majority are adopting, then you're golden, right? Because then it gets chunked in to the part of your brain that the myth money has value, right? And then suddenly just Bitcoin's money. I have a question for you.
Yeah, shoot.
So you saw the thing about Google and the quantum computing?
Yeah.
Okay. What happens when we actually get quantum computers? Aren't all of those security protocols of Bitcoin child's play to a quantum computer?
So as my understanding is that you can write quantum-resistant cryptography.
Really?
Yeah, but it's just a different form of cryptography. I'd be so out of my depth. But my understanding, so Bitcoin has this thing called soft forks and hard forks. Okay. A hard fork is where essentially you have to make you know Bitcoin is a chain of blocks, right?
I do, yeah.
So
yeah. I say I don't know, I have the basics down.
Oh, I'm only at the basics still now. That's why a lot of people hate me, because they expect me to know so much more. But essentially, when you do a hard fork, you're making a certain change to the core protocol. The only way it can be done is with a hard fork, and what that means is that the blockchain splits. Now, if all the miners move over to the new chain, it's not a problem. Okay. But some of them might not. Some of them might mine the old chain, and then suddenly you have two coins. This is why we went from Bitcoin and now have Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV and all those nonsense.
Because of this reason.
Yes. Okay. Now, as my understanding is, for a quantum-resistant Bitcoin, that would require a hard fork. But that's fine. In that scenario, you're probably fine because the other one doesn't hard fork. It will be destroyed by the quantum computers anyway. And also, my other understanding is that realistically, we are decades away from any usable quantum computer.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree about that.
It's gonna be my grandkids' problem.
Yeah. I always try to stay up on all of that stuff because it fascinates me.
Next up, I talked to Jim more about free speech and the financial system and investing. But before that, I have a message from my amazing sponsors. First up, the mighty Kraken. And they've recently had a massive announcement. They've launched their first mobile app, Kraken Pro, which allows you to trade Bitcoin on the go. So it doesn't matter whether you are on the bus, on a train, whether you're in Starbucks, or whether you're just sat on the couch watching Liverpool smash City, you can download Kraken Pro and trade on the go. There's so much packed into the app. They've got real-time price updates, multiple charting and order book display options. They've got advanced trading features so you can go long or short on 8 different cryptocurrencies. You've got to 5x margin trading. You can open and close your positions in bulk in just a few taps. You can view your complete order history of all order types, trades, positions, deposits, and withdrawals. And the app comes with a deep and liquid set of 100 cryptocurrency markets, fees as low as 0%, and 24/7, 365 global customer support. The app is badass. Go download it now. It's available for the iPhone and Android. Just search for Kraken Pro, which is KrakenPro. Also, lastly but never least, is the amazing BlockFi, the future of financial services and Bitcoin. They've got 2 products now which you can use. They've got their interest accounts and their crypto-backed loans. And with the interest accounts, of which I am a customer and I am loving getting my interest every month, they have dropped all minimum deposits. Interest account holders no longer have to meet a minimum deposit amount in their Bitcoin, Ether or GUSD balances to start earning interest. BlockFi have also removed the early withdrawal penalty from the account and is now offering 1 free withdrawal per month for all clients. Add to this their recent announcement of BlockFi Flex, where you can choose to receive your interest payment in the currency of your choice. You really need to be checking this company out. You should definitely do your own research, but if you're interested in trying out BlockFi, then head over to blockfi.com, which is BLOCKFI.com. So I want to ask something back to you, because the education thing is a really important thing to me. So I've been having an ongoing battle debate between my son and my ex-wife to do with my son's education. He has no interest in biology, physics, all these things he has to do, right? He's doing terrible at them.
How old is he?
He's 15.
Okay.
So I had an agreement with him. I said to him, if you choose not to do your homework or not to do very well in these subjects and not to revise, you won't get in trouble with me as long as you replace them with something else. Mm-hmm. And he didn't, so therefore he has to work at them. But my view being is that, like, my theory and the reason the education system hasn't changed is that the way it's currently set up is very easy to measure and to create league tables between schools, and also for political parties to use to say, oh, look, we've improved education. Mm-hmm. But realistically, I think, like one of my friends said, we're still teaching children to memorize facts when they're carrying around supercomputers in their pockets.
In their pockets, yeah.
And, with the growth of AI and automation, my view is that we should be teaching a lot more in creativity. We should be allowing our children to spend a lot more time on expressing their creativity. They get one art lesson a week, yet 7 science lessons.
So yeah, I have very strong views on this.
Yeah.
I think that you are absolutely right. I can really only speak to, I know a bit about the UK's educational system and how what we think is a private school is a public school.
Yeah, yeah.
But here in the United States, the tyranny of measurement, the tyranny of teaching to a test, I think has destroyed, and I hope not intentionally, but destroyed natural curiosity. Mm-hmm. Because essentially, the minute the what you're aiming for becomes something measurable, it ceases to have much value, right? Like, so when the Brits were in India and there was a rat problem, right? People who brought in rat tails showing that they'd killed rats, right, got paid pounds sterling. Well, guess what people did? They bred rats, cut their tails off, and brought the tails in, and so the rat problem exploded, right? So one of the things that I'm a deep believer in is you should be absolutely orienting a child's education today towards creativity, towards synthesis, the ability to synthesize ideas, right? Now, so I'm 59, I'm older. One of my things was I memorized 100 poems when I was like 18 years old.
Okay.
And so the one part about memorization that I do think is really helpful is, like, I have access to lots of things immediately in my mind that people who haven't memorized, right? So it's like T.S. Eliot, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, right? Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Okay, so bam.
That was really cool.
So bam,
Yep.
If I'm looking for something that I want to make a point or whatever, I'm writing something or whatever, the access to all of that, Shakespeare, my God, the man was a genius. And I shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds may shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date.
Wow.
Now, this guy, whoa, this was a genius. But what's cool about it is because I did that, I get instant access, right? Because I know about it. The thing that I worry about, and I'm sure we'll figure out, right, is that if you don't have that memory, if you don't have that instant thing that you can grab onto, you might be. It's like, so I have a lot of fun with GIFs on Twitter, right? And so there's like 2 schools of thought which I just think are hysterical, right? So millennials, and it's almost always millennials. The first school of thought is that there's no way it's actually me. Right? And I've gotten like impassioned emails, generally from people in India, which I find interesting. And it's like, dear sir, I mean you no disrespect, but you are simply too old to be this good at GIFs.
I said it earlier in our thing. You're a meme king. Like, I was like, because when I was preparing, I was like, he's not 59. No way. I've seen him meme. Like, he kills it.
So the first school of thought is that I've got a huge team of millennials who are doing all this.
That's what I
The
assume.
one that I really am intrigued by, though, and I must admit that I tease some people into maybe saying, oh, maybe you might be right, is the school of thought that we have some killer AI at OSAM that I'm just playing with on Twitter just to see how it works. And literally, those people, they're like, I knew it. And so I love millennials. I love young people. Just my grandfather surrounded himself with young people all of his life, and it keeps you young, right? Mm-hmm. And so I have a lot of millennial friends, and like one guy was just saying to me, come on, you just tell me. And I'm just like, I'm going to give you a hint. Here's the hint. I have 30 years more of cultural references than you do.
Yes.
So, and he went, oh, yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, right? So it's like that goes without saying from Young Frankenstein, right? So Gene Wilder, great comic. A lot of people who are young never saw Young Frankenstein. They don't know about Mel Brooks. They don't know about Blazing Saddles. By the way, a movie that could not be made today.
Not a chance.
In fact, most of his movies couldn't be made today.
No.
But I know about all of that stuff. And so I'm able to just immediately go, oh, this reminds me of that. But back to education.
Yeah.
So,
but my thing is, like, how does it change? Because I don't want us to get to a point where they can't, they're not learning things. They need to learn. They need to go through a process of learning. But I just feel like there's a balance wrong. So, for example, my problem with testing and exams is that I've employed people, you have. When you employ somebody, you don't put them in a room and say, right, for the next 2 hours, you can't talk to anyone, and you're not allowed a computer or a calculator, and I want the answer back. You give them a computer and you give them a calculator, you give them pens and you give them colleagues, and they figure stuff out together. And
exactly.
To me, that's the real world.
That's right. And we are not educating for the real world at all.
No.
And I think so one of the things that I've always found to be true, and I'm sure there's tons of exceptions, but the most curious people in the world are also the ones that I find to be the smartest, right? And that's because they know that they're not that smart. Right? They're wise in the Socratic sense of knowing how little they know, right?
That's why I do this.
Exactly. You want to call me wise? It's only because I know, like, very little.
Jim,
but I can look it up.
I want to meet as many people as I can from as diverse backgrounds, and I just want to ask them questions and find out stuff.
Which is fantastic. Yeah. I love that.
It's the best job in the world.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of what I do now, right? It's so I'm so lucky in that, like, most people will take my call.
Yeah.
And so I have met some of the most fascinating people in the world and learned so much. But that's the thing, right? So Dorothy Parker, who was one of the Algonquin table wits, had a tragic life, but she had a quip that was, the cure for boredom is curiosity. There is no cure for curiosity. And she's right? I mean, if you live your life in constant curiosity, which is the way I live mine, right? It's so cool because you get to learn so many things that you didn't know.
Yep.
The worst thing that we can do, and back to education, is to make kids believe that certification means anything. Because it doesn't. 5 years out of college, okay, so they've done studies on this, right? So if you go to one of the Ivy Leagues like Oxbridge in the UK, here it's Yale, Harvard, Princeton. So if you go to one, and my daughter graduated from Yale, my other two kids from Notre Dame, so they went to really great schools. But so if you get out of the Ivies, for the next 5 years, you have a huge and massive advantage over people who went to a state school. Okay?
Yep.
You cannot argue it. Huge because of the network that you have, because of everything.
Yep.
However, after those 5 years, guess what happens? That advantage begins to diminish. Why? Because you're now being judged on your performance.
Well, because when you go for that first job, what does it say? It says Notre Dame, or it says Yale, or versus whatever, and whatever you've done on the weekend, and any kind of volunteering work you've done. But then it's like, oh, I've worked at X company, I delivered this. I've worked at, and also people get a feel for you.
Absolutely. And you're seeing it happen right now. So there was a kid on Twitter, right, who put it out there that he wanted to work in programming, and because somebody else had access to like his Reddit, and they saw that he was like this champion gamer and programmer, they offered him a job right there. And that's happening more and more and more.
I'll tell you a funny story. So I used to have an advertising agency in London, digital side of things. And whenever we'd put out a job opportunity for a graduate, we'd get about 80 to 100 applications. And it was really hard to filter them because you could very easily just go, well, let's give all the people the highest qualification on the degrees, and that didn't work. So what we started to do was we would just give each CV a very quick look, did anything stand out?
Yeah.
And move on. Just very quick look.
Yeah.
One day this one comes in, and it wasn't a Word document. It was an infographic.
Interesting.
And I was like, what? I was like, this guy's done it. And I was just like, and it was beautiful. And I was like, that's really interesting. So he came in for the interview and he got the job on the spot.
Yep.
Because he just thought differently, and he was one of my best ever employees. Alex Carapiet went on to do some amazing things. Great guy. But he blew my mind. And this is one of the things I was trying to get across to my son. Is like, Jim, my grades were terrible. Like low at bottom third of this thing. But I've never struggled because I've worked hard and been a bit lucky at times. I've worked hard. But I said to him, if there's something you want to do and you work hard at it, you'll be a success. If you want to be an actor, you work hard, you'll be successful. If you want to be an artist, but you've got to put the hours in.
Yep. Yep, you
Unfortunately,
do.
he won't do it right now.
Well,
Yeah.
again, 15, give him time.
Yeah.
Our brains aren't fully formed until we're 25 anyway. So
I don't think mine's there yet.
mine probably isn't. I'm certain of that. But, I think you're on the right track. The track is, you need to take responsibility and help your kids along, right? It's not the state's job.
Nope.
It's not somebody else's job. It's your job. I mean, one of the best things that I ever did with my kids, right, was, so I was lucky because my wife and I got married very young. We were 22.
Nice. Okay.
And we had Patrick when we were 24. But we had conversations about, what's our goal? How do we want to raise our kids? And we came up with a really simple line, which was, we want our kids to be great adults. Now, if you think about that for a minute,
Let them be kids.
but also think of how many things it precludes. If you want your children to be great adults, there's no saying, you're going to do this because I'm the father, you're the child, and you're living under my roof.
Yeah.
Doesn't work, right?
I've said that.
if you want them to be
Yeah.
a great adult, what do? You get them to present a case to you.
Yep.
So whenever my kids would come to me, I'm lucky in that I'm blessed with a pretty good memory, especially if I've read it. And so they would come to me and try to use me as Google before Google, right?
Yeah.
And I have a huge bookcase at my house, and what I would say to them is, the answer is in there. Look it up. And, at the time, they weren't happy about that. But guess what? You got a bunch of incredibly curious, bright people who got used to finding the answers on their own.
Yep.
And again, just sort of that simple line of demarcation, we want great adults, led to behaviors on my part and my wife's part that encourage certain things like arguing or presenting a reasonable request.
Isn't it funny, though, that first time when your kids are growing up, you always, you maybe tell them off. And one day they come to you with a thing and you're like, shit, you're right.
Yes.
I'm in the wrong here. Oh, God, now how do I deal with this? Do I apologize? Do I say I'm sorry? Do I tell you stop being cheeky? I remember that first happened with my son. That was, changed. And look, Jim, I'm learning as a father as I go, and my son's my guinea pig for it because he's my firstborn.
Right.
I was 24 like you, and I think I'm doing a better job with my daughter, and I'm trying to, sometimes I do that, you are under my house, but I also get them to challenge authority. My son had this thing at school, I think I might have talked about it on the podcast before, but he had a creative piece of work he had to do. It was a monologue, and he found one online that he really liked, and it was set during the era of segregation in the US, and it was a white guy in a factory who was criticizing the fashion and style of black people.
Okay.
It's a really interesting creative piece. It's a historically creative piece. And his teacher on first review said, I'm not sure you can do this because we may have some people watching who are black and might be offended. And he came back and said, Dad, I'm not sure I can do it. And I said, well, let's talk about this.
Right.
do you want to do it? And he said, yes. I said, why? He said, well, I think it's a really good piece. I said, well, this is about creativity, and what's actually happening is a form of censorship.
Yeah.
And I said, and he tried to explain what censorship is. And I said to him, look, you have my permission, if they ban you from doing this, to refuse to do anything.
Very cool.
Yeah, he didn't want to do it. He was like, no, Dad, I'm not like you. I don't want to be confrontational. But I wanted him to have that opportunity to have a think about it.
Well, almost. And what happened?
He ended up doing the piece.
Great.
Yeah, he ended up doing it. They allowed it in the end because they realized it wasn't racist.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Yeah. And but that's interesting to me, Peter, because either outcome would have been a great lesson for your son, right? The outcome of doing a unique and creative thing and being able to do that, but also denied father's permission to say, sorry, you're not going to censor me.
Yep.
That's a nice message too.
I tell you what doesn't help though is because I'm separated from his mother and we're very different on our views. I'm like challenge authority. I was like, you can challenge your own mother, you can challenge me, you can't be rude.
Right.
You can challenge schooling. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. Like you say, if you've got a good case, his mum's like, no, he needs his exams. And she's. I think the problem is we're both right. I think he does need his exams and his results, but he needs a bit of both. But it's really interesting. I mean, let me ask you another thing. So you've got a few years on me. You've got 19 years on me. So your son's going to be 19 years older, which is naturally,
Yeah, my son's 34.
Yeah, so he's my son's 15. Yeah.
Right.
So my dad told me one thing. Is it true you never stop parenting?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Is it? Okay.
And yet, so I'm very lucky in that my relationship with all three of my kids is very pari passu. It's very, believe me, they have every right and take every opportunity to criticize their father.
Okay.
And my youngest, my stand-up comedian daughter, I mean, literally, my wife always knows when I'm on the phone with her because I'm laughing my ass off. And, it's all slams on me.
Yeah.
Which I think is really funny.
So she's moving here, you said?
She is, yeah.
So next time in New York, I'll maybe get a chance to see her stand up?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. So she's on fire. So she got picked for Just for Laughs, which was...
Nice. I know it, yeah.
Yeah, right. So she was one of, at least I was told, that she was one of the first comics to get picked on her first application. And so we went to Montreal to see it. It was great. Love seeing all these young people because they're funny as hell.
Yeah, they are.
And we were talking about comedy when she was here. She just left yesterday, as a matter of fact. And it was like, I can be pretty funny as well. And I had a friend, an old girlfriend, say to me, you use comedy as a weapon. And I'm like, wow, I hadn't even thought about that. And she goes, what you do is you say something that's true that you could never say if it wasn't funny, right?
Okay,
so
that's a fair point.
I started thinking about, comics like Ricky Gervais, about people like Dave Chappelle. And you know what? They kind of do, right? It's kind of like it gives them the ability to bring out things that like everyone might be thinking, right?
Yeah, of course.
But no one's going to talk about unless it's funny. So, yes, you never stop parenting, but you do come to see your children as adults, as equals, as, it's like I elevated Patrick to CEO of OSAM because I knew he's going to do a better job than me in terms of, he was massively active, tons of ideas, and in corporations, particularly privately owned, succession is a huge issue, and it shouldn't be.
Are you watching the TV show Succession?
That's so funny that you bring that up because my wife and I watched the first episode, right? And we're like, these people are awful.
Yeah.
We're not going to watch this. This is horrible.
Yeah, you've got to go back to it.
No. So I'm at dinner at Patrick's. He just got back from Africa, and Succession comes up, and he goes, "Hey, wait a minute. You don't watch Succession?" And I'm like, "No, we watched the first one. We hated it." And he was like, "Dad, watch it."
It's genius.
And so he's got a great batting average with me because Breaking Bad was another show we started watching, didn't like. Patrick was like, no. You got to watch it. Of course, it turns out to be one of our favorite shows. Peaky Blinders, I found on my own, loved. Didn't think my wife would do it. And so she's listening to Patrick, and he's like, "Oh no, that's a great show." And so she's like, "Okay, I'll watch."
Handmaid's Tale?
Oh yeah, so interesting. So we watched the first one, which was kind of fun, but then we started the second season, and I'm just like,
Interesting.
you know,
I struggled on the first season.
Did you?
Yeah, it took me like 6 episodes. I was like, oh, this is boring. Towards the end, it picked up. Then I really liked the second, and the third wasn't as good. I actually thought the second was better. Interesting how people see it differently.
So, well, you know, you pick up on things, and so...
But Succession?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
have you gone back yet, or are you still on?
We're going to start...
You wait.
Yeah, and so... But honestly, so I thought a lot, because I was the chairman here of the Chamber of Music Society of Lincoln Center.
Okay.
It's basically the best chamber orchestra in the world. Mm-hmm. Very proud of them. They're fantastic. Our artistic directors are amazing. David Finkel and Wuhan. And anyway, when I became chairman, I said to them, I will only do this under 2 conditions.
Yeah.
The first is that I will only be allowed to serve 2 terms. Because if I can't get done in 5 years, which is kind of 2 years plus a year, then I've failed.
Yep.
And you want to get rid of me, right? Because I'm bad. And if I've accomplished everything, then you want fresh blood. And secondly, I want my successor to already be picked. And so the woman I wanted to succeed me named Eleanor Hoover. She's a bigwig at Citibank and one incredible woman. And I went to her and I said, look, I'm not taking this unless you tell me you'll take that. And she agreed. The point being, I think that you can screw so many things up by simple, you know, not having a succession plan. By making Patrick CEO, which he earned, by the way. You know,
and his show is great, by the way. I know his show.
Yeah.
But one thing I didn't even think to check: have you actually been on it?
I have, yes.
Yeah. Do you know what? It just crossed my mind because I'm trying to remember. I've listened to I think 3 of them, and I can't remember which ones. I'd have to go back, but I didn't even think to check. What was that like doing it with him?
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. Patrick and I really are on the same wavelength, and you know,
very similar then.
Yeah. And you know, lots of differences, obviously.
Of course,
but it was fun. We didn't really talk about factor investing or quantitative investing at all. We told stories, which was fun. But he struggled with whether he should have me on or not. You know, it was kind of like, you know, I'm only having you on because you're my dad, but you did write What Works on Wall Street, which is like a big deal. And, you know, would I have you on if you weren't my dad? Of course I would. And, you know, he went back and forth, back and forth. Anyway,
I bet that was one of his better shows as well.
Oh, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. I really enjoyed it. And listen, what I think is fantastic is, again, back to Succession.
Yeah.
By naming Patrick CEO of OSAM, something he richly earned, and I'm going to tell you a story about that in a minute, we got rid of anyone's questions about our intentions, right? We're around. We're not going anywhere. You know, it's Jim doesn't want to hit up Saint-Tropez and, you know, sell the company. We want this to be a multi-generational success story.
Yep.
And immediately the market understood that.
Yep.
It was like, oh, okay, they're not going anywhere. But so we've had a great relationship with the Royal Bank of Canada for more than 20 years. I mean, amazing handshake deal back in 97. I mean, can you imagine?
Nope.
A fellow by the name of Simon Lewis, who was the head of their asset management, came down to Greenwich. He was like, all right, we love this. Dave Chilton, the author, was the one who showed him What Works on Wall Street. And you got to remember, back then, that was like brand new. So anyway, we did a handshake deal, started with the funds. They're called the O'Shaughnessy funds up there. And so anyway, the Canadians are great people, but especially RBC employees are tough. They will, if you screw something up, you're going to hear about it, and you're going to, and more importantly, they're going to say, you're going to fix this, right? So they're very tough graders. And so Patrick had been working for OSAM for a while, and he'd gotten really, really good. And so I decided I was supposed to go up and do a week of presentations. And up in Canada, if you're RBC, you know, there's going to be 500 people in the room. And so I said, I called the head of asset management, and I was, can I send Patrick up? And he was like, are you sure? And I went, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And he goes, sure. And I go, and then call me and tell me. And so anyway, bated breath, right? Because they're going to be blunt.
Yep.
And so Doug called me after Patrick got back, because I said to Patrick, how'd it go? And he was like, yeah, I thought it went really well, and so, okay, good. No obvious blow-ups. And then I got the call from the CEO, and he goes, Jim, I have two things to say to you. And I went, okay. The funds, remember, are named O'Shaughnessy funds. And he goes, number one, when Patrick hits his peak, he's going to be so much better than you at this. And I was like, whoa, that's music to my ears. And
I don't know, I'd still be a little bit like that.
But then the second thing he said, we can't tell you how happy his name is, O'Shaughnessy, because selling the O'Shaughnessy funds.
There you go.
So we have like I mentioned, we've got a broad employee ownership of the company, but our name's on the door. Mm-hmm. And so...
what does it mean for your time now, though? Like, are you able to do more luxury projects?
So, yeah. I mean, honestly, I have the massive indulgence of being able to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Patrick runs things day to day. I'm still the co-chief investment officer. You can't make changes to the strategies without my sign-off. Mm-hmm. I'm chairman. Patrick reports to me, and everyone else reports to Patrick. But I wanted to also take this opportunity to say, even though our name's on the door, we wouldn't be what we are without our team.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I mean, we have been so lucky to have like the smartest. It was like, that's another one of my things. Hire people who are smarter than you are.
Somebody said to me, hire slowly, fire quickly.
Yes, boy. And I've had 3 of my own companies. I've worked for a big company, Bear Stearns, and that is so true. Because, what's interesting is not only do you know, they know too. They know that this just, for whatever reason, this fit isn't working. Mm-hmm. And if you don't immediately address the situation, it festers, right? And so we've been blessed with not getting too many of those wrong, right? And so Chris Meredith, who's my co-CIO and leads our research effort, he's a genius and figures things out and can code like a coder, but the whole team and the collective brain power that they have brought is just stunning to me. I think it's fantastic. And then Patrick had this innovation of the idea of O'Shaughnessy Research Partners, where we allow people who don't work for us to have access to all of our tools and data. Now, our data costs millions of dollars a year. So people who aren't in our industry can't do that, right? Unless they're independently rich. Mm-hmm. So our first guy blogs under the name Jesse Livermore. He's anonymous, and yet one of the smartest market thinkers I've ever come across. The pieces that he's written for us have been, ridiculously brilliant. Back to distributed intelligence, right?
Yes.
So we've got some ex-Google people, machine learning. They're writing, I'm teaching us about things that, I'm in awe. and so I just think it's like, for me, I love where I'm at right now, because every day I can pursue reading, which I read endlessly. I love learning about new things, Bitcoin, machine learning, artificial intelligence, etc. And then I get to also help people in the industry along, right?
Yeah.
So I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, it's hard, right? When you're 20, whatever, and you're coming out of school, and it's like, what do I do? Who do I talk to? What kind of shop should I work for? And so I've enjoyed very much helping with that. But yeah, I'm very lucky. I can sit and do the podcast with you.
This is awesome. And we've already, I usually like to get an hour. We're already at an hour and 15.
Right.
We haven't really talked too much about investing, which is great.
Yeah.
I do have a couple of questions on that though. Firstly, it almost like these are kind of summary questions, but I'm not an investor. I'm certainly not a trader.
Right.
But are there any key principles of investing that anyone can use in their life that you would say, at least, look, if you just do these basics, when you retire, you're going to be in a better position than you are now?
Yes, absolutely. For the vast majority of investors who aren't investors, right?
Yeah.
Who would rather do other things. The best thing to do is set up a retirement scheme. Here in the U.S., they're called 401ks, individual retirement accounts, etc. and methodically put money in no matter what's happening in the market, right? And if you just want to buy the whole market and buy an index, that's fine too, because you're going to get the power of ownership and expanding earnings and all those things, low costs, that's great. If you want to take a step beyond that, process matters, right? So if you're looking at a manager who can't easily articulate their process, take a pass.
Right.
Because ultimately, you know, what's funny about this is that there's studies from 1971, like IBM looked at their pension managers, and what did the best ones have in common? Well, the thing that sticks with me, it was in the Journal of Portfolio Management, but the thing that sticks with me is they all had a process that they could easily articulate and that they stuck to religiously, right? So the enemy is you, right? There's a cartoon here in the US called Pogo. It's not around anymore, but one of the most famous panels from it was Pogo looking and saying, we've met the enemy and it's us. And man, that is so true in investing. Behavioral biases are rampant. They can't be educated against, which is really interesting. There's a paper that I reference. You can find it on my profile from a Google talk I did. 45% of investor behavior is genetic, and you can't literally change it. And so if you're looking for the tried and true principles, the tried and true is find a scheme that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Put money from your paycheck in it. Start young, because the compounding that allows is extraordinary. And pretty much, you're young, you're 40, right?
Yeah.
So even if you haven't done anything in the past, if you start right now doing that and just putting it in, sometimes the market's going to be down 30% and everyone's going to be running around with their hair on fire. Sometimes the market's going to be climbing and in a bull market and everyone's, totally into it. If you just pay no attention, benign neglect. For your average person, benign neglect is the best thing that you could do.
Nice.
I always say that the 4 horsemen of the investment apocalypse are fear, greed, hope, and ignorance. And if you think about that, only one is not an emotion, ignorance, right? Fear, greed, and hope, they've wiped out more money than any bear market ever, because we can't help ourselves. No. I'm fascinated by this. I've studied it for years and years and years, and my best advice is understand you're not an exception. You're going to be just as susceptible to this as other people. I would be if I wasn't a quant. Oh my God, I'd fall into every behavioral bias in the world. And so my answer to it was, I'm automating a process that I have tested over historical data that it works, base rates, batting averages. But for your average investor, process, benign neglect, just do it habitually from every paycheck. You'll be fine.
A few less coffees, a few less Starbucks.
No. That kind of stuff just drives me crazy. It's like, listen, get an investment scheme first.
Yep.
Right? Get your paycheck so that it automatically flows in from each paycheck. Or if you're independent like you, make sure that you set aside X percent. Mm-hmm. And the rest literally takes care of itself.
Right.
But we are always getting in our own way, right? And we always are like, oh, but I just saw this guy on financial TV and he said that the crash is coming. Well, okay. So let's do our homework. Let's see how many other times he said a crash was coming. How many times was he right? Never. So we have this.
Stop trying to beat the market. Is
Exactly.
that what you're saying?
Well,
most of us don't have the skills or time.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so if you want to beat the market, hire people like us.
Yeah.
Right? Where there's a process, and there are others too. You don't have to hire O'Shaughnessy. There are other quants. My friend Cliff Asness runs AQR, and he's a genius. And there's all sorts of people that you can hire. But process, empirical evidence is helpful. I mean, would you ever go to a doctor and the doctor looks at you and he says, Peter, I just got these little yellow pills here. I don't know anything about them, but I think I got a good feeling about these. You're going to run out of that guy's office immediately, right? You want double-blind tests. You want long histories. You want batting averages. And so if that's what you want to do, then by all means, hire somebody who's good at that, or get good at it yourself, because there's a lot of do-it-yourselfers too, and they buy like things like What Works on Wall Street, Invest Like the Best, etc. But all of that is moot unless you can understand you are your own worst enemy. I'm my own worst enemy. I mean, it's universal. It's a universal condition because we're human beings, and because our software systems are optimized to 50,000 years ago. Versus the world's and society's software systems, which are optimized to now, right? It's like, why are we afraid of snakes? We're afraid of snakes because it's in our genetic code, right? We are the descendants of the people who ran away. Think about that.
Yeah.
You're out on the savannah, you see a bush moving. I'm going to go see what that is. He gets eaten. The guy who goes, I don't care what that is, I'm running away. So why do you think we react to risk the way we do, right? I was reading this guy who was sort of kind of tongue-in-cheek saying, I don't know, maybe 100,000 years from now, we're going to be terrified of cars when we see them because they kill a lot more people than snakes. And yet, so there's this mismatch, right, in human nature. That's why I'm always saying arbitraging human nature is the last sustainable edge, because everybody thinks they're special, right? There's a GIF that I use a lot on Twitter. You are the only exception. No, you're not.
Yeah.
And you look at surveys, men in particular were the worst.
Yep.
Women make better investors because they're far more willing to admit they might be wrong.
Yeah.
Guys were awful.
Yeah.
It's like you look at driver surveys that you give to a bunch of guys. Everyone except the more modest is in the top decile. They all are the best drivers. And the modest guys put themselves in the second decile. No one's in decile 3 through 10. Well, we all know from driving that that's not the case.
That's not the case.
Athletic ability, endless. Everybody thinks that they are, the shit. They're not. You're not. I'm not. Right? And so if you can get into a mindset that is like, I don't want to, it's not going to be my hobby. It's not going to be what I'm interested in. I'm interested in, doing podcasts and doing creative stuff, digital marketing, whatever. Then benign neglect, do it make a habit out of putting the money in there. You'll be fine.
All right. I think that's some amazing advice. Jim, this has been so much fun. I knew it would be. Like following you on Twitter and seeing you memeing and everything. I think a nice way to finish out is just what's coming up. What are the things you're really interested in right now, the things you're going to be doing? Like, what's coming up for you?
So lots of really exciting stuff from the company. We debuted what we are calling kind of the first investment operating system. We call it Canvas. Mm-hmm. What it allows you to do is really, really cool. It allows you to customize a portfolio right down to your preferences, right? So you don't like tobacco, you don't have to own tobacco. That's the beginning. It also manages, if you're a taxable investor, it manages to generate consistently, we found through research, and we found historically doing it for some of our clients, certain amount of basis points every year just from better tax management, which is fantastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because alpha is getting harder and harder to find, but it also deals with things like single stock exposure. So it allows you to customize down to Peter exactly the portfolio that's right for you, right? And we're super excited about it. The interest, Patrick debuted it at a conference about a month and a half ago. The response has been like beyond our wildest expectations because it's the next leg. It's where investing is going. And so I'm super excited about that. I tried to do something similar, which we called Netfolio back in 1999. Mm-hmm. And, the tech just wasn't there. The tech's here now. And so this is going to be, I think, a sea change, because one of the other things that we're trying to do is, we talked about behavioral biases. I was trying to figure out a way where we could put behavioral biases in people's favor as opposed to against them. And one thing that we've learned is that when people take an active hand in designing a portfolio, and it could be something as really simple as, I don't like these 5 stocks in the S&P, but give me the S&P 495. They are far more willing to stick with it, right? And that's the game. The entire game is getting people to stay in the market no matter what.
Patience.
Yeah. So very excited about that.
Nice.
Doing a lot of research into mimetic behavior and how it. So a long time ago, I had kind of sat down and I thought, okay, what is the stock market, right? And I found it. I wrote it in something like 1988. And what I said was the stock market is a complex adaptive system with feedback. And then I added, under heterogeneous conditions, in other words, your opinion's different than mine, it's pretty efficient, right? So I might sell you Apple, and I'm selling Apple because I want to give something to my grandson. You're buying it because you've got a 15-year-old son, and you want it to grow for him. But it works pretty well, right? However, when mimetic behavior starts driving things, and mimetic behavior is essentially copying other people, right? Those various viewpoints move from heterogeneous to homogeneous. Everybody's thinking the same. Mm-hmm. Think .com, think 1987 crash, think 1929 crash. And what happens is information cascades happen, and they take over. And everyone starts doing things exactly the same. And so what I'd like to do is find some form of quantitative signal that doesn't tell me it's going to happen, but tells me that it's happened, right? Because the very nature of a black swan, right, is you can't predict a black swan. If you can, however, find a measurement that you can verify empirically, doesn't say, oh, I'm going to see a black swan now, but says, oh, by the way, Jim, you just saw a black swan. That could be very, very useful. So I'm working on that. And then I'm toying with writing another book about what you need to be able to traverse and get where you want to get, right? And people talk about things like talent stacks and things like that. I've thought a lot about that. So
you're not slowing down then?
No. I mean, honestly, I'm never going to retire. If Patrick listens to this, it's like somebody said, did Patrick see you tweeted that? And I said, Patrick doesn't read my tweets. Anyway, but I'm never going to retire. I had a very successful grandfather, and he gave away virtually 95% of his fortune. He did very, very well during his own lifetime, which I'm incredibly proud of. But one of the things that I'm also proud of was when I was a little kid, I got to have dinner with him like twice a week. And it was like, never retire. Because when you retire, you're getting ready to die. and so he never retired.
You need a job where you don't want to retire. Then some people are not going to have that. Like what I do, I could do forever. I'm having a conversation.
And I'm lucky enough that I can be in that position as well.
But I think some people probably. My dad was an aircraft engineer. He wanted to retire.
Well,
I'm done. He's
like,
I'm done. Of course,
I get that. But then find another passion or avocation.
Golf,
right?
Golf for him, day in, day out.
Well, okay. So anything, right? That I happen to want it to occupy your mind, and I guess golf does.
Yeah, occupy your mind and just keep moving. I think they're the two things.
Those are the things you got to do.
Yeah.
And because, that's how you stay young. And that's why I like young people so much, because they're bursting with ideas. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And, that's where it's at.
Well, this has been great, honestly. Thank you so much.
Oh,
I've
my pleasure.
really enjoyed this so much.
As did I.
Listen, you should tell people how to find out more about the business and where you are on Twitter.
So
I'll share it out.
I appreciate it. The business, very easy to find us. It's on the web at osamoscarsamadam.com. Lots of research there for those people who like that kind of thing. We've got some fantastic research, both from our people on the team, but also our research partners. You'll be able to check out Canvas, which I was talking about. And you can find me on Twitter at JP O'Shaughnessy. those are my two main ones.
Great.
And you'll be able to find us.
Awesome. And I'm going to send you now. I'm going to show you an actual Bitcoin transaction.
Oh, that's very
I'm going to
cool.
blow your mind. So we're going to do
awesome.
that, and then I'm going to head off because I need some sleep. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you, Peter.
All right. So what did you make of that one? Did you enjoy that chat with Jim? I think with his experience, it's unsurprising that he's so knowledgeable on so many different things. And I probably could have talked to him for like 5 hours, just going down the rabbit hole of so many different topics, not just the investment stuff, but politics, media bias and free speech. I really, really enjoy getting into this with Jim. It's also great to talk to somebody who's been in the traditional banking industry for so long and get their thoughts on the current state of things. So I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. A massive thanks to Jim for coming on the show. And also, it was very cool to send him his first Bitcoin. I feel quite proud of that. If you've got any questions about the interview, you can hit me up. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. Also, thank you to everyone who supports the show, supports this, and also supports my other show, Defiance. I'm not sure if you checked that out yet, but that's doing very well as well. But yeah, if you want to support the show, there's loads of things you can do. It doesn't matter if you want to be a sponsor, leave me a review on iTunes, you want to become a patron, everything helps with keeping the show going. You want to find out more, head over to my website, it's whatbitcoindid.com, click on the support section. Also, as I said, I'm back off to the States tomorrow. I'm heading out to New York for a few days. I think then I'll be going to Boston, San Fran, LA, Hawaii, Texas, and maybe Washington. So hopefully I'll get to meet up with some of you. Lots of cool interviews planned as well. All right, have a great week, and I will speak to you soon.